Hi, this is Greg Johnson, Director of Media Development for Blue Book. And today I'm here with Pamela Riemenschneider, our retail editor. And we're going to talk a little bit about a column you just wrote. As we know, we are right at the beginning of winter, and it's the season where so many of our fresh produce items are imported. And you wrote a column about kind of consumer perception of imported items versus the local produce trend and the paradox you see.
Consistently it comes up, and especially it seems like more often lately consumers are valuing the idea of local produce, but it doesn't match the reality of what we see in the marketplace. It's, as we talked about, we're entering 2019. This is winter. This is the big time season for imported produce. We just started posting stories from the most recent Blueprints articles on Hispanic produce, and kind of struck me of how much produce is actually imported compared to what consumers think. In last year's Power of Produce report, which is produced by 210 Analytics and the Food Marketing Institute, local was actually given a higher affinity than organic with their survey respondents. But we saw back in the spring, there was a New York Times article where more than half of the fruit that is consumed in the US is actually imported. So it kind of brings up, are consumers aware of how much food they're eating is actually imported? And is this a problem? Do you think it's a problem? I don't.
Yeah, that's the big point I see in consumer media is a lot of times consumer media acts like this is a big problem that we have to confront when the reality is everyone in the produce industry knows most produce grows where it's warm. And the only time it really doesn't is when it's harvested when it's warm and then put in storage. And so, of course, I live in Kansas City. It's freezing today. There's no local produce here. And more than half the country is that way. We're in the beginning of winter.
So I'm not sure there's actually a solution for this problem, but I think there is some awareness needed on the reasons that we import so much of our produce and where that trend is going. We're seeing a whole lot more development from our Blueprints articles in different countries in Latin America. We typically associate our imported produce with Mexico. Let's talk about things like sugar snap peas from Guatemala and the Dominican Republic. There's a whole lot more of that than people realize.
Well, not only that, but anytime there's a discussion about imported produce, I'm amazed how rarely people point out that the number one consumed produce item in the United States is bananas and is 99.9% imported because it's a tropical item.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm wondering where that 0.01% of domestically produced bananas is coming from. Perhaps Hawaii. I don't know. Maybe there's a small niche farmers markets where they're selling bananas in Hawaii. Yeah, that kind of skews the numbers a bit, but there's also some surprises out there, like 75% of garlic and asparagus. That's one of the ones that a lot of people don't talk about is how much of our asparagus, and this includes processed asparagus, but it's in the 90s of how much asparagus is actually imported versus what's produced domestically. So it's interesting, and I think maybe the produce industry needs to talk a little bit more about this, but it's not a bad thing. I want everyone to have access to fresh, affordable, healthy fruits and vegetables, and I'm not taking a side on where it comes from.
No, me neither, for sure. There's so much good produce coming in from other countries. It's just reality, and it leads to higher consumption.
Thanks, Greg. Again, this is Pamela Riemenschneider and Greg Johnson for Blue Book Services.